This is my crime drama. It's called The Fixer. To give a basic synopsis of what the show is about, it will be set in 1968, which is kind of a hotspot for gangland activity in the UK at the time. It'll be set in Birmingham as well, and it'll follow a gun for hire called Ron Burton, who wants to escape the business. However, his employers become wise to his scheme, and soon he has gangland members and the police on his tail. I called it The Fixer because it's a very direct link to the crime world. It gives you kind of an immediate idea of what the main character does, as well as the theme of the show. So the basic plot of the first episode, we'll introduce Ron as he does a job for his employers. He kills a man on a boat, and we'll see that he doesn't enjoy his job. Following that, he'll go back to his dirty apartment in Birmingham, where he finds his payment, and he'll scheme of how he's going to get away. He'll call up his ex-wife Julie, who's one of the main characters of the show, because he feels very guilty because Julie is a victim of his gangland activities, as one of the victims of one of his jobs kidnapped Julie and traumatized her heavily. So he feels a need to escape with Julie. We'll then see that he gets a phone call from his employer Frank, and for another job. And he reluctantly goes to Frank's office, where Frank will offer him a job. Initially he doesn't want to take it because he's close to executing his plan to escape the country. And Frank is a very dangerous character to mess with, and he doesn't truly trust anyone, so he becomes quite suspicious of Ron's activities. In the end, he takes the job and leaves after hassling Frank for extra money. And so Frank knows something is up and sends someone to follow him. So on the way back, Ron passes Julie's house and stands outside the door, but he can't quite work up the courage to knock. And ever since the events that led to them splitting up, which was the hostage situation I mentioned earlier, he's never really been able to talk to Julie again. Eventually he goes back to his apartment, and as he slumps into bed, he turns the lights off. We'll jump forward a bit in time, and he'll start to hear kind of sounds coming from his living room. He realizes that someone's inside the house, and he jumps up, and there's a scuffle in the dark, and he eventually strangles the man. And turning lights on, he realizes that it's one of Frank's employees who's come to follow him, and that would be the cliffhanger of the first episode. So the basic beginning, middle, and end, we'll set up Ron and Julie, and we'll find out about his plans. In the middle, he'll go to Frank, where we'll get the dilemma of Frank wanting to chase Ron and see what he's doing, and then it'll end with the cliffhanger I just mentioned. So this is Ron Burton, born to a single mother and addicted to alcohol. He had a very bad childhood, which led him into this life of crime, and his mum eventually died of her alcohol addiction, and this led to him being taken under the wing of Frank. So he feels a need to be loyal to Frank, and that's why Frank trusts him more than anyone. And then we see him during the show. He is aged 40, and he's finally lived out his life of crime. He feels the need to escape and make a better life for himself. Frank Cornell, little isn't really known about Frank. He keeps his secrets very close to him. He's the leader of one of the biggest gangs in Birmingham in 1968, with many establishments and enterprises. And he's clawed his way up, and he feels very protective of what he's created, and he doesn't want to let anyone get a piece of it. So when he sees a single suspicion from Ron, he immediately decides to chase it up. And then there's Julie, who is Ron's ex-wife, once an outgoing girl who did lots of kind of partying and clubbing, and met Ron and settled down with him without knowing his gangland activities. And eventually she was dragged out of her home and blindfolded and gagged. And this led to a traumatizing hostage situation which Ron saved her from, but once she realized his true job, she stood up with him, and she's lived with the trauma ever since. So the first key scene is Ron's introduction, which will be right at the beginning of the episode. It'll have a thin, twitchy man on a narrow boat, more than a canal. He's kind of panicking and scrambling to put stuff in his bag and get out of there as quick as possible. And we soon get wise to he's kind of watching and expecting someone to chase him. He looks out the window and sees on the other side of the mooring a large man in a balaclava, slowly skulking towards the boat. So this kind of thin, twitchy man freezes, runs back to his bag, packs all his stuff in it, picks it up and runs. But he immediately pauses, realizing that this balaclava-clad man has entered the boat and is behind him with a handgun cocked to him. And initially the thin man attempts to act calm and offer him a drink, but he refuses, and slowly this guy shifts to the fridge, where we'll see that he has a pistol stored in his fridge, and he's planning to launch it on his attacker. However, the man in the balaclava gets to him first, realizes what he's up to, and shoots him. And then we see the man leave the boat in the rain. He stops and takes his balaclava off, where he's revealed as Ron, and he'll kind of show a sadness to what he's just done, and it's clear he doesn't enjoy what he's doing. So Stephen Graham plays Ron. He's got a Scouser accent, which I thought was quite good for this role. Liverpool has kind of typically been a working class area in the past, and I think that kind of helps to give you an idea of his background, maybe where he's coming from. He's kind of a large 43-year-old male, and I think Stephen Graham's really good for the role as well. He's quite a tough-looking guy, but he also plays a lot of sympathetic roles. We have to kind of feel for him, and he does a very good job at that, and that's what I want with Ron. Then we have Jamie Foreman, who's worked on EastEnders, as Frank, who's played mob bosses in the past. I think he was in Once Upon a Time in London, where he played a very similar role. I think he gives off a very intimidating presence. And he also is the son of a real-life gangster who operated with the Krays. Then Helen George will play Julie, because I think she can give off quite kind of bubbly characteristics, but if you've seen Call the Midwife, she can also do a very good job at kind of acting vulnerable and sad and scared, which is why I think she fits this role of a girl who was kind of once outgoing but has now been pushed back into herself via this trauma.
Could you go to your launch date and budget, please?
My budget is here. It amounted to around 955,000.
Is that per episode?
Yes, okay. That would be per episode.
What's the most expensive thing on your budget? What costs the most to produce?
Studio and location expenses is what came to the most, which is about 150,000.
Okay, and your launch date?
So the Fixer will start on the 5th of October in 2019, which is a Saturday. It'll air every Saturday from then on. I think October is a good fit for this because the Fixer is set during a kind of, it's quite a gloomy, grim show, and I think October being a kind of rainy, dim month, I think is a good fit and atmosphere for the show. And it'll air Saturdays because obviously that's when everyone is off, and it'll be post-Watershed because this is too violent and deals with kind of adult themes, too adult for kids to watch. So that'll be 10 o'clock on Saturday. And it'll air on BBC One, and it'll be a 5-part miniseries.
Okay. Can you go to your script storyboard and explain those, please?
I scripted Ron's introductory scene that I talked about earlier. So it's kind of a similar situation of Ron entering the boat in Mask. We see this kind of scuffle I talked about earlier where the thin man is kind of scuffling all this stuff together to escape the boat. We see this dialogue here where the man kind of awkwardly tries to shift his way to the fridge to grab his gun, and Ron shoots him. And then it'll end the same way that I explained earlier as well, with Ron leaving the boat and showing a sense of sadness for killing the man on the boat. And this will lead straight into the title card. So this is my storyboard of Ron's introductory scene. Here we see a wide shot of the narrow boat would be the opening shot, showing where the scene is set. We'll then go inside and we'll see a mid shot of the thin man shoving stuff into his bag to try and escape the boat. This will then lead. There would then be 3 following shots where we will see a close up of him, kind of peering through the window, through the blinds to see if anyone's outside coming towards the boat. This is when we see Ron slowly come. We'll see a wide shot outside the mooring, which will show Ron's legs shifting towards the boat, so there'll be kind of a sense of suspense as the audience tries to guess what it is that's coming. The scene which I've also scripted and storyboarded, I made a short sample film at the start of it prior to the dialogue. So here we see the wide shot of the narrow boat where the scene is set, and through the window we see Thin Man shoving stuff in the bag. So he's kind of shoving stuff in the bag, trying to escape the boat. And he looks out the window. As I said, this is the shot where we see Ron's legs. And then Ron comes out from behind the bush towards the boat, which leads the Thin Man to kind of freeze in fear and then run back. He grabs the bag, tries to run. We see Ron's entered the boat. He turns around, frozen in terror. And there's Ron in his balaclava. And then we do a slow zoom towards the Thin Man. And that's the end of the first sample film. This is the second. Here we open this location, the chalk pits. So here's a guy, he's bird watching, looking at nature in the chalk pits. We see a shady figure start to approach him.
Bird watching? It just helps to take the stress off work. What do you do for it? Just an office job. What do you do for it?
So here we see the shady man kind of approaching from behind. He says he works for Frank Cornell, the mobster. And he throws the man off a cliff.